Hey all, TT Neal here, talking about storytelling, genre, writer's life, assorted things. I think about the plight of the writer, and you've seen, well, if you've watched any of my other posts, you've seen different things where I talk about various writerly laments. And one aspect of the writer's life is observation. We are the perennial observers of the human condition, and we ruminate and we speculate on things. Those of us who are trying to do something worth reading, not just churning out junk. And, as observers and spectators on the human condition, on the human experience, there's there are insights, I guess, to be gained, and I've referred to it over the years, really a long time, as the writer's eye, and said the writer's eye just kind of sees all, and I've talked about that, and it's kind of weird in moments of crisis, whether personal or political or national or international, watching how people are. To live as a creative person, or specifically as a writer in troubled times, is interesting, because you see how people deal with it or don't deal with it. A whole myriad of responses. And, we as writers have an instinct for observation and for trying to kind of read between the lines in what we see and what we observe. And I hate to say it, because this will sound perhaps negative, but we have, on a variety of levels, a kind of reductive way of breaking down what we see from people. And I have to explain this, and apologies if this is long-winded. Because we make characters, we write characters, what that effectively means is we deconstruct aspects of people that we might know in real life, or people that we imagine in life, and we assemble them, we create them to ideally create believable characters. And again, all the stuff I'm talking about, I'm not including hacks in the equation, because hacks will just use stereotypical characters, archetypes, tropes. They will lean on all those things and just produce unrealistic characters that have no depth. But if you're really trying to create something or someone with depth, you really do strip mine your entire life experience and what you have observed and put it into those characters. Now, ideally, you're not one-to-one drafting from people that you may know, but you may take a little aspects of it and create an alloy, if you will. And where I'm going with all that is, when you watch people behave kind of the same way over and over again about situations, or people who lie to themselves about who and what they are again and again and again. As a writer, it's hard to look at that and not have that sense of, well, saw that coming. Does that make sense? That idea, like, people who are shallow and ignorant and selfish and greedy and hateful they are also people, like, no one cops to being that way, right? Nobody says, "Oh, I'm just a greedy bastard. I'm just a selfish son of a bitch, and I don't care about anybody else. I don't care about anybody." No one likes to see themselves that way. It's kind of like when people say, like, the villain is the hero of their own story. Okay? You've heard that, I'm sure. And no one just comes out and says, "I'm a villain." No one, even the villains, don't do that. And when you watch it in real life, in real time, from a writer's perspective, there is I don't know how to put it exactly, a distance that one cultivates almost for your own self-protection as a writer, an aloofness to the world around you, because you've kind of seen it all before. We uniquely, honestly, in society, truthfully, writers, we really do look at the human condition, and think about, and we create fictional life. We create characters, and so someone might come forth and be like, I'm a good person, I'm a virtuous person, and then the writer's going to look and go, yeah, but are you really? And I'm not saying that it fuels cynicism, because the act of writing, fiction writing especially, there has to be a certain element of idealism inherent in it. But over time, as you've written enough things and created enough things, you start to see patterns, And if you were a writer, and I'm certainly one who does this, but who is an avid world builder, you look at the components of the world and how things go, and you see the building blocks of how things get the way they are. Like our current catastrophe, as I call it, in our current situation in this country. I saw the roots of it back in the 1990s. And I remember that's in my 20s, when I became very active politically and engaged in that. I remember seeing like the seeds had been planted way back then. And most people didn't even see that, because they weren't seeing things from a writerly perspective. They were seeing it from their own perspective. And just like when you go to a play and you're watching the play perform, you're not backstage, you're not in that position. You're seeing it as a show. And I think for most people, they're seeing what's going on as a show, and they're not really thinking about the underpinnings and how we got to this place, how things got that way. But the creatives of the world, and again, I veer toward writers because that's where my experience is. Those of us who are not part of the problem, those who are not complicit in the hateful behaviors or ignorance peddling or fear mongering or hate mongering, all that stuff, like, you can see people wrestling with it without really understanding it. But from a writer perspective, you do understand it, because when you're writing a story and if you're creating a villain, how do you build a villain? How do you create a villain? Well, you draw from what you understand to be villainous, and you breathe life into it. And like I said, this is a very esoteric, philosophical kind of talk I'm doing here. But I guess what I'm saying is that it's tragic in many ways that not as many people read as they should, because so much of it has been addressed by writers. The human condition. Writers create fictional experience in books, and characters are fictional representations of what could pass for actual human beings for people. You can read, if you read a well-constructed story with a good character, it feels real to you. And so I guess where I'm going, and I apologize that it took so long to get to that point, but it's we are illusionists. But to be an illusionist, you must not be deluded. Does that make sense? You need to be able to see clearly in order to be a good illusionist. And that's one of the key distinguishing points between writer folk and folks who don't write. We gaze upon the illusions of the world and we get behind them. We get behind those curtains. We create. And because writers are by our nature illusionists, we're crafting illusions, ideally compelling illusions, enticing illusions. We are more fortified for seeing all of the illusions around us in terms of what people construct around themselves to be able to exist in this world. I'll stop here now because this is getting a bit long, but there's more I can speak of on this illusion and delusion.